Hey guys, these are the notes for linear applications. So we've learned how to solve equations and to solve inequalities. So these are applications of them. So these are all going to be word problems. Our essential question is, how do I know what my variable is when I read a word problem? So normally what your variable is going to be the thing that you don't know, or the thing that it might be asking you, like how many pencils did they buy? So your variable would be pencils because you don't know what the pencils are. So it's usually the thing that you don't know, or it's the thing that they're asking you to find. All right, so it says write and solve the following equations and inequalities. Identify what the variable and solution represent. So I'm going to write my inequalities. I'm going to define my variable. So if I'm going to use x in my equation or my inequality, I have to tell you, or I have to tell myself what x means. So for number 1, the sum of 3 consecutive even numbers is 48. What's the smallest of these numbers? So first of all, let's figure out what consecutive even numbers means. So consecutive even numbers. Consecutive means in a row, and even numbers are your even numbers, which are all the numbers divided by 2, or divisible by 2. So like 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, yada, yada, yada. So, for example, 3 consecutive even numbers could be 10, 12, 14. It could be 2, 4, 6. It could be 30, 32, 34. So any of those. So those are consecutive even numbers. They're even numbers, and they're in a row with each other. All right. Now let's talk about what we're asked to find. We're asked to find the smallest of these numbers. So that's going to be our x, or our variable. So it's going to be our smallest number. Okay? And then it's asking us for the sum of 3 consecutive even numbers, or it's telling us that. So we don't even know what our smallest number is. So let's go ahead and use like a real number example. So if I had 3 even numbers, 3 consecutive even numbers, 6, 8, and 10, let me ask you, how do I get from 6 to 8? Well, I would add 2. How do I get from 8 to 10? I would add 2. Well, let's talk about from the first number. So from 6 to 8, that takes me 2. But from 6 to 10, I'm going to have to add 4, right? And it doesn't matter for what consecutive even numbers you are, it will always have this pattern. So like 14, 16, 18, to get to the next number, I would add 2. To get to this number, I would add 4. So this is the same for every even number. So you always have to add 2 to get to the next one, and then add 4 to get to that next one after that. So if I'm talking about consecutive even numbers, I'm going to start with my smallest number. So x is my smallest number. Okay? Now, the next number, like I said earlier, so if I bring up that example, how do I get to the next number? I'm going to add 2 to that. Do I know what my smallest number is? No. So I have to take my smallest number, and I'm going to add 2 to it. I'm going to take 2 and I'm going to add it. And then, how do I get from my smallest number to the next number? Well, earlier from 6 to 10, I would have to add 4. But I know what 6 is. I don't know what x is. So I'm going to have to take my third number, and it's going to be whatever my first number was, and I'm going to add 4 to it. So these are my 3 numbers. This is my first, my second number, and my third number. Okay, so your first number is x. The next number, you're going to add 2 to get there. And then your third number, you're going to add 4 to get there from whatever your first was. All right, so let's erase all this. And then I know the total of these numbers is 48, and is indicates to me equals. And then it also tells me the sum. It tells me that I have the sum of 3 numbers. So that means I'm going to have to add all of these together. All right, now that we have all of that out of the way, we've set it up. Now we can just do math, right? So normally if there are parentheses, you do what? You distribute. Well, what's technically in front of these parentheses? Technically a 1. But if I were to distribute a 1 or multiply by 1, does it change what I have? No. Like if I do 8 times 1, it's going to stay 8. If I do 1 times 7, it's going to stay 7. So multiplying by 1 doesn't really change anything, so I can just drop my parentheses. So I'm writing the exact same thing, but without parentheses this time. Okay, now at this point, I'm going to combine my like terms. So I know that I have x, actually I have positive x, and then I have another positive x. So I have 3 x's, so it's going to be 3x. And then I have 2 plus 4. That's going to be positive 6. And then I have the 48 from earlier. And then at this step, I'm going to solve like normal. So I'm going to subtract 6 to both sides, or 6 on both sides. I have 3x equals 42. And then I'm going to divide both sides by 3. Now I have x equals 14. What does x equals 14 mean? Well, I said that x was my smallest number, so that means that I'm going to take, that means 14 is my smallest number. So 14 is the smallest number. That's what it represents. Now, if it asks for all three numbers, then I would say it's 14, 16, and 18, because 14 is the smallest one. And we know it's consecutive because they're one after another. And that's what it told us. So that was number 1. Number 2, Julia spent half her weekly allowance on video games. To earn more money, her parents let her wash the car for $4 and take the trash for $2, or take out the trash for $2. What's her weekly allowance if she ended with $24? Well, I know she started with an allowance, but I don't know what that is. And it also asks us what our weekly allowance is, which means that's the thing we don't know. So x is going to be our weekly allowance. Okay. Ugh, my handwriting. All right, that's our weekly allowance. So we know we start off with a weekly allowance at the beginning of the week. We don't know how much it is, but we know it's X. It's some amount. But then she spends half of her weekly allowance on video games. So if she's spending an amount, that's going to be minus, because she's taking away from whatever she had, and she's using half of it on video games. So you have your allowance, and then you divide that by 2, because you're spending half of it. Another way to write that, you could also write it as 1/2 x. So those are the same thing. Okay, and then to earn more money, her parents let her wash the car for $4. So her parents just gave her $4 just because. So we're going to add that 4. And then they also just took the trash out for $2. So they just gave it to her. So we're going to add the 2. We want to know what her weekly allowance is if she ended with $24. So how do I know if this is an equation or an inequality? Well, it says that she ended with $24, which means it's going to equal $24. Okay, it doesn't say for her weekly allowance to be at least $24. If it said at least, then it would be like, oh, inequality. But that's not the case. All right, so now at this step, we're just going to try to solve for x, but I see a fraction. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to multiply by my least common multiple, and my least common multiple here is 2. It's my only denominator. So because I have a fraction of 2, I want to get rid of the fraction by multiplying the entire side by 2. But when I multiply one side by 2, I also have to do it to this other side as well. So I'm going to have to distribute 2 to every single term inside those parentheses. So 2 times x is going to be 2x. 2 times x over 2. So that's technically like negative 1/2 x. So x are 2 times this, like this. So it's like that. Sorry, I'm trying to like explain. It's really hard because you can't see my hands. So these 2's would cancel and I would just have x. But I would have negative x. So if I wrote that on the side, hopefully that makes more sense. X divided by 2. These 2 would cancel and I would just have negative x over 1. So that's like the long way. Okay. Then I have 2 times 4, which is going to be positive 8. And 2 times 2, which is positive 4. And then over here I have 2 times 24, and that's going to equal 48. All right, now at this step, I can combine my like terms. So I have 2x minus x. That's going to give me just x, or 1x. And then I have 8 plus 4. That's going to be plus 12. And then I still have the 48 over here. So I'm trying to color code for you to show you where I'm getting things. From here, I'm going to subtract 12 on both sides to get x alone. And I get 36. Well, what does that mean? I have to represent that. Well, it means that $36 is her weekly allowance. All right, moving on. Number 3. Ellie has 40 candy bars. She gave 2 to every student in class, and now she has at least 8 left. Find the maximum number of students in class. Well, things that indicate to me inequality are at least and maximum. Right? So those 2 keywords are like, oh, ding, 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 no equal sign, I'm going to have an inequality. So let's talk about what we have first before we even worry about what sign we have or anything like that. We have 40 candy bars. So she starts off with 40 candy bars. So I'm going to start off with 40. Just like earlier, we started with a weekly allowance. In that case, we didn't know it. Well, what's the thing that we don't know here? That's going to be our x. So we don't know what? The number of students in class. So the maximum number of students in class is the thing we don't know. So maximum number of students. That's going to be our unknown here. All right, so she has 40 candy bars, and then she gave 2 to every student. We don't know how many students there are, but we know that she gave 2 to every, so that's going to be 2x. And if she's giving them away, that means I'm going to be subtracting. All right. And then we want to know how much, or now she has at least 8 left. So I know I have 8 over here, and I got to figure out what inequality I have. So at least 8 left means I could have 8, or I could have 9 or 10, so anything more than 8. Right, so that means that whatever this amount is, however many candy bars she gives away, it has to be greater than or equal to 8. It can't be smaller than 8 because it says she has at least 8 left. All right, and then after this step, we just solve the inequality like normal. So I'm going to subtract 40 on both sides. So I have negative 2x is greater than or equal to negative 32 because 8 minus 40 is negative 32. The next step I'm going to do is I'm going to divide by negative 2 because I want x by itself. Now, I divided by a negative number, which means my sign, my inequality, flips the other way. And negative 32 divided by negative 2 is 16. Now, you would know it was wrong if you had a negative 16 because what does x represent? X represents the maximum number of students. So you can't have negative 16 students. So you want to make sure that your answer always makes sense. So x is less than or equal to 16. What does that mean? It means she has at most 16 students, right? Because it has to be less than or equal to 16, so she can't have more than 16 students in her class. All right, moving on. Last one, number 4. You go to the store and buy paper for $2 and pencils for 25 cents each. You only have $5.50 to spend. What's the maximum number of pencils you can buy? So you're going to the store and you're buying paper for $2. So that's just a flat amount. I'm not basing it off of anything. I know I'm spending $2 at the grocery store. And then you're buying pencils for 25 cents each. Well, do we know how many pencils we bought? We do not, because it's asking for the maximum number of pencils, which means x is going to be the max number of pencils. Okay? Now those are the maximum number of pencils, so we don't know what those are. Now, we know that it's $2 for paper. We don't know how many pencils, but we know how much it costs for each one. So, it costs 25 cents for each pencil, so that's going to be 0.25x, 25 cents per pencil. And then we also know that we have only $5.50 to spend. So I can't spend over $5.50, but I could spend $5.50. So that means that amount that I spend over here needs to be less than or equal to $5.50 because I could spend $5.50, but I have to spend either equal to or less than. I can't spend more than $5.50 or we're going to be in trouble with the cashier. And then the next part is, well, you're purchasing 2 different things and you're going to add those items up. So you're going to have a plus sign here. All right, from here, you're going to take away 2 on both sides. 0.25x less than or equal to $3.50. And then your next step is going to be divide by 0.25. And the reason why we had 0.25 is because each pencil is 25 cents, not $25. So I get 14, I believe. 3.50 divided by 0.25. 14. So that's going to be my answer. X is less than or equal to 14. What does that mean? It means the max number of pencils you can buy is 14. That's the most that you can buy. All right, so that is it for our notes. So obviously the most challenging part is setting them up, and then once you have that, it's kind of basic math that we've been doing. So if you have any questions, please feel free to come in and ask.